Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Schaefer. I'm the Director of Channel Marketing at Island. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Comprehensive Data Protection from iland and Tag Solutions. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's presentation, so you can view it later. It will be on the Tag Solutions website in the next few days. And we'll also be taking some questions at the end of this presentation. So if you have any during the broadcast, please type them into the question panel in the GoToWebinar um, uh, uh, side panel there on your screen. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Will from Iland and Dave from Tag Solutions. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dave, for joining us. This is going to be really fun stuff. We got a lot of stuff to cover. Let's talk a little bit about the agenda today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the current IT landscape, talk about some data protection strategies, talk about IT resilience strategies, talking about how the cloud has really enabled organizations to really, embrace some of these technologies that even 5 years ago were very difficult to do. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce Dave. Dave is from Tag. Dave, can you please tell us a little bit about Tag, our relationship, our partnership, some of the solutions that you provide for customers, and then we'll talk about how all that fits in together so that we can make our customers, our joint customers, successful in this process.
Sure, Will. Yeah, thanks very much. So my name is Dave Venner. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at Tag Solutions. We're very excited to do this webinar in conjunction with you folks at Island. We've been working together now for a little bit over 6 months, and it's been great. In terms of Tag Solutions, I see that a lot of people on here are customers, but essentially we do three big things at Tag Solutions. So thing number one is managed services, outsourced IT. Thing number two is unified communications, which is anything communications from your phones, video chat, instant messaging, those sort of communications. And then the final thing is cybersecurity. Again, I'm really excited to sit on this webinar today and answer questions. We hope it's helpful to our clients.
Awesome. And now we've been working together, like you said, about 6 months or so. So what are some of the solutions that we provide our customers together?
Well, the one that you're presenting on today, the Veeam backup, Office 365, those sort of things have been where we've been focused a lot.
Awesome. All right, so let's kind of jump right in. So, I'm not going to read every single word on every single slide, but I think this one is really prevalent. There's this kind of common, I don't want to say it's a joke because it's not a laughing matter, but in the consumer space, you're always hearing about now more than ever, or now's the time, or we're all in this together. But being in IT, we've always been in it together. We've always been kind of in the trenches and working to make our companies successful. And now more than ever has always been the mantra, right? And so, really the IT landscape is constantly changing. Every single year, there's new innovations and new opportunities and new risks because of that. Companies who are seeking the latest strategies to adapt, secure, and protect their mission-critical data are turning to the cloud to go beyond the physical limits of data protection in traditional environments. And I love this kind of paragraph, quote, saying, whatever you want to talk about, because I've been doing this for 2+ decades, and I've been a backup guy, I've been a disaster recovery guy, I've been rack and stack cable guy, and cloud really has kind of changed how we do everything differently in our consumer lives, but now also in our enterprise life, and it's really powerful. Now, the reason that we're all here today is, you can't open up the news without seeing something scary, right? And we jokingly talk about how it's dangerous to go alone. Take this, that's an old video game reference. If you get it, cool. If not, doesn't matter. But it's scary out there, and especially for IT, because for the most part, IT is responsible for kind of like this arms race where, the bad guys are constantly doing bad stuff, and IT is at the front lines of protecting and recovering and doing all this stuff. And the best IT is one where nothing happens, but we all know that that's not realistic. And so the betterest bestest, whatever, IT is the one that can adapt and fix and make sure that they can respond to some of these challenges, right? Nobody ever calls IT and says, hey, great job in not having a ransomware attack today, or great job in not having any outages. Like, that just doesn't happen. And so IT is constantly under pressure and constantly under scrutiny, and it's pretty scary out there. And you guys all know this, but your data is your lifeblood. Like, you can always buy new servers, you can always buy new applications, you can always do stuff, but your data is the lifeblood of your organization, and it has to be protected. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. You need to have availability to this data, right? It doesn't matter if you have all of the data in the world, but nobody can access it, whether it's because of an internet issue or a connectivity issue or a power issue or whatever. If it's just sitting there and nobody can utilize it for business decisions and moving forward the needle per se, it doesn't do you any good, right? And in IT, we all know that accidental deletion still happens every single day, time period, whatever. There are so many times when human error and the human factor just comes into play, and so you just got to be able to protect from that and recover from that. A lot of times, the news, you get the external threats like ransomware and malicious insiders and, corporate spies and stuff like that. And while that makes a lot of the headlines, there's still a lot of things that could just be simple mistakes or, outages or whatever. But you still need to be able to protect from all of these things. And then when it starts coming to like legal issues and compliance and policies and InfoSec and stuff like that, when you start thinking about policy gaps and long-term archival and legal and compliance, that really comes into play as well. Because, most of the time when people think about data protection, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, they really talk about two things. You've got the InfoSec people who are like, well, I've got to protect my data from people getting to it. And then you have the backup and recovery people like myself who are like, well, I need to protect the data by being able to recover it. But then you have the legal teams like, well, no, we need to protect it to save our butts, right? We there may be a legal hold, there may be a government regulation that we need to worry about. Like, there are other things that we need to protect this data for, especially for long-term archival and stuff. So while we all know this, and we all know that the data is the most important thing, and we all know that if an outage happens, it can be bad. It can be very bad. And a lot of times you can actually kind of calculate what the tangible cost of an outage is. How much lost revenue do you have? How many orders did you miss out? Or, how expensive is it to, go buy new hardware if there's a failure or whatever, right? So that's, a lot of these TCO calculators and ROI calculators, they kind of factor in that kind of stuff. But think about the intangible costs, and that's really what we're talking about today in protecting the perception, the loyalty, and the confidence of your customers in your ability to provide services. Think about your consumer life, right? If you go to a website because you want to buy a new widget and you can't get to the website, well, you're not going to wait around. You're just going to go somewhere else, right? If you see somebody, just the other day, I read a report where Jack Daniels, the makers of Jack Daniels bourbon or whiskey, whatever it is they make, had a ransomware attack, and over 1 terabyte of data has been compromised, right? Now, if, as a consumer, I'm probably not going to change my, my drinking habits, right? But if you were a customer of theirs, or you invested in them, that's going to cause you pause and be like, well, wait a minute, is my sensitive information compromised? What's going to happen with that? So when you think about all of the intangible costs of an outage, they always say it's harder to recover a customer than it is to get them the first time. Perception, loyalty, confidence, but then also think about internally, right? So how many times has an IT personnel had the challenge of going to someone and saying, well, why did you put this on Dropbox? We have our own internal share. And the response is, well, yeah, but the internal share was down and I had to get my job done, right? So it's not just the perception and confidence of external customers, but also internal customers. Your executive team, how much confidence do they have in the IT team to be able to provide the resilience that you need to keep the organization running, right? So these intangible costs are probably way more costly from an outage than just like how many orders did I lose, or how many people sat around doing nothing for 4 hours because they didn't have email, right? Now, that being said, there's no single simple solution. So data protection, IT resilience, it has to be a multifaceted, comprehensive approach. And there is a ton of different things you have to think about. And unfortunately, it falls into IT's hands to have to come up with all of these solutions and all of these problems. And so, Tag and Iland and Veeam, we're all here together to make our customers successful and to make it as easy as possible, because it doesn't change what IT has to do on a day-to-day basis, right? You still have your other IT obligations and IT jobs. And, we always talk about, business value and pushing the needle, and IT is all about delivering business value back to the business. It's not about setting up firewall rules. It's not about doing backups. Like, those are things that have to be done, but IT has a job to advance the company. And so with the solution provided from Veeam and Tag and iland, we're here to help you have that comprehensive data protection and IT resilience platform so that you can continue to work on those other things. Now, it's not all bad news. It's not all doom and gloom and all sorts of bad stuff, right? And we did this is a little bit older now, but we did a channel partner report, and over 96% of companies with a trusted backup and disaster recovery plan were able to survive ransomware attacks, right? There's a FEMA article from years ago. It really relates to hurricanes, but the value and the ideology of it is still the same, where if you lose a year's worth of data, you're going to be out of business within a year, right? And ransomware can pretty much do the same sort of thing. So it doesn't matter if it's a hurricane, it doesn't matter if it's a power outage, but ransomware can also do that. So having that trusted backup and disaster recovery plan are essential in protecting the lifeblood of your business, that data we talked about. Now, this is kind of a silly joke, but we always talk about how if this is your disaster recovery and IT resilience plan, we're glad you're here, because we are going to talk all about some of the things that you can implement. In fact, we've got a whole series of different conversations that we're going to have. Now, it really starts with defense. And this goes back to what I talked about before, where you have InfoSec people, and the InfoSec people, when they think data protection, they think about things like firewalls and biometric scans on the server room, and that kind of stuff. And then you talk to your HR people, and they talk about policies and procedures and awareness, like how often, and these are all things that you have to think about as an IT person, because eventually it falls to you, right? How often do you do ransomware and phishing and malware related training? How often do you send out emails with examples of this is a phishing attempt? Or how often do you talk about don't pick up a USB drive from a vendor show and plug it into a computer? You've got this entire onion of defense that people talk about. You've got obviously the human factor of policies, procedures, awareness, but then you've got physical security. What happens if somebody can just walk into your building? You've got network security, and that's usually where firewalls and traffic shaping and VLANs and all sorts of stuff comes in, and understanding segmentation of data traffic between classified and unclassified, and do you have a red wire and a green wire and all that crazy stuff that people talk about. The servers themselves, like how do you secure your server? Patching and making sure you have the security software, and making sure that you have passwords for everybody. And a common thing I talk to customers all the time about, Jill is an administrator, and so she just has her Jill as a username and password, and she has full access. But you can't really track that, right? You need to have Jill as a user, and then when she needs to do an administrative task, she can log in with Jill admin. The application stack, and especially the data stack, is it encrypted? Do you have redundancy? All the stuff like that. Now, before I talk a little bit about protection and recovery, Dave, I know Tag has a full security practice and professional services. Would you like to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you guys can provide and present specifically around this type of stuff?
Yep, sure. Thank you, Will. So clearly we do a bunch of this stuff, right? So some of the things that our customers are hiring us to do today is just by way of example is backup and disaster recovery plan. So we have a 50-point checklist that we will go in and ensure that everything's working and in order. We also have things like ransomware and crypto checks, right? So same thing, we'll come in and inspect the servers and inspect all the switches to ensure that they haven't had a breach. I think the biggest things that people hire us for are the vulnerability assessments and penetration tests. All of our customers and if people on this call should be doing regular vulnerability assessments and penetration tests.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, I said it at the beginning, it really is an arms race. And it's an unfortunate arms race because the bad guys are always one step ahead. And we as IT professionals have to continually stay on top of this. So it's not oh, well, I implemented a firewall 3 years ago, I'm fine. No, and it's these constant audits and stuff like that. And that's where where Tag can come in and help show you not only vulnerabilities, but also best practices. We talk about policies, procedures, awareness, and the human factor. Even something as simple as every 3 months. I know at Iland, every 3 months we get a thing that everybody rolls their eyes about, and they're like, oh, I got to take my ransomware training again. But yet it consistently like hones in and drives in that notice that this is something that's important. You always have to stay up to date. Now, once you have, and this is a whole nother conversation, but once you have defense, then we can start talking about protection and recovery. Now, as a backup and IT resilience guy, this is kind of where I come in. And it really starts with this idea of the 3-2-1 rule of data availability. And it really comes down to, you want to have 3 copies of your data. You want to have, your production data that you're constantly using. You want to have another copy of it and then another copy of it. And you want to have at least 2 different media types, even for local backup. I can't tell you the number of times where, you walk into an organization and they've got this fancy SAN and they've got their VMware cluster and they're taking backups to disk. But if the SAN goes down, you've lost your production and you've lost your backup, right? So it has to be 2 different media types. And then you have to have a offsite air-gapped copy of your data. And this is for all sorts of reasons. This is, it doesn't matter if it's a hurricane, it doesn't matter if it's a power outage, it doesn't matter whatever, but you need to have that air-gapped offsite copy. Now, traditionally, you would throw a tape into a safe at somebody's house, or as you got bigger, you'd start leveraging like these warehouses. But then, there's just so many things. Tape drives have evolved, and data backup strategies have evolved. And do you really want to worry about, do I have a tape drive that can read a tape from 4 years ago still on site? So cloud really has made having that additional offsite air-gapped copy very possible and just much more feasible, because it's always available, it's instantly recoverable, it's recoverable anywhere. It's encrypted in flight, it's encrypted in rest. There's so many more benefits than just throwing an old DLT tape in a truck and hoping that it gets to where it's supposed to be and then it doesn't like deteriorate over 3 years, right? So that's the kind of 3-2-1 rule of data availability. But it can't stop there. So with Iland and Veeam and Tag, we're all building this broader data protection solution. So it starts with secure cloud backup, and that's what I was talking about, that 3-2-1 rule and the offsite air-gapped backup with encryption, stuff like that. But maybe you're also looking at things like S3 compatible object storage, and this can be used for things like scale out backup repository or copy cloud tier, capacity tier. What it does is it gives your local backups kind of a elastic cloud-based storage repository that you can grow as you need. And then eventually moving to secure disaster recovery and IT resilience. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then as more and more organizations are leveraging Office 365 for collaboration and communication and creation with SharePoint and Exchange and OneDrive, there's an entire solution around backing that up. And I'll talk a little bit about the whys and the hows and all that stuff. Now, that being said, again, going back to the IT struggles, right? IT's job is to advance business value and to make the businesses do what they need to do. And it's not about backup. It's not about, object storage or choosing, how to recover an email. They just need to get that done so that they can move on. And so with Veeam and Tag and Iland, we provide a single solution that can incorporate all of these things together. And with the Iland Secure Cloud Console, you have full access, management, and visibility into all of it together. Now, iland Secure Backup as a Service leverages the Veeam copy function to do encrypted in flight and encrypted in rest copies of your local backup. So what you do, right, is you have your virtual machines, they're sitting there, you back up the virtual machines, you back them up locally, and so there's your second copy, and then you take a copy of that copy and you send it to the cloud. And there's all sorts of data deduplication and trimming and all sorts of cool things that you can do with that. But what that allows you to do is have a secondary copy right on site that you can immediately recover from, either file level or virtual machine level, whatever you need. You can recover it in place, you can recover it to another virtual machine, you can mount the VMDK and read the files if you need to. There's all kinds of ways to recover. But let's say you can't access that for some reason. Maybe the secondary device is either down or there's an issue or something like that. Then you can leverage your cloud and you can recover again back to place. You can recover somewhere new, or you can recover it to a completely different data center if you have to, right? A lot of times when people talk about backups and recovery, and I'll get to this when I talk about IT resilience, if the power's out in your building, it doesn't matter how good your backups are, right? You can't recover to anything. There's no power, you can't do anything. So having the options and the availability to have constant availability and recoverability in multiple different ways is super, super important. Now, in addition to cloud-based backup as that tertiary offsite air-gapped backup, we also have this thing called insider protection. Now, everybody hates to think about malicious users, right? Nobody wants to think about somebody coming in and deleting all the data, right? But when someone is an admin, they have the keys of the kingdom, and you have to have full and complete trust in them. And there have been stories, and it happens, we hate to think about it, where an admin, either disgruntled or losing their job or whatever, deletes data and then deletes backups, right? And now with a cloud-based backup, if that admin has the same accessibility, they can go and delete their cloud-based backup. And now as an organization, while there's legal ramifications and you can sue them and do all sorts of stuff like that, at the end of the day, your data is gone, right? So there's this idea called insider protection. Now, insider protection lives in the cloud. It's an iland and Veeam solution that lives inside the cloud that can only be accessed by iland support. So think of it like a recycle bin. So if the worst thing were to happen, somebody comes in either maliciously because they got credentials that they're not supposed to, or because they're just bad people or whatever, they delete the virtual machine, they delete the backup, they delete the cloud backup, and then they get out of the building or whatever, you still have a copy of your data. That data is still secure, and it can only be accessed by iland support. It can be recovered, and then you can do the chain and recover it all the way back down, right? So it's a complete end-to-end protection system for your data, which is very, very, very important. Now, I talked a little bit about having visibility and management, but when you do all this, right, you need to have visibility. You need to have an understanding. As you move to cloud, cloud changes a lot of dynamics. It changes how you pay for things. It's no longer I'm going to go buy a rack of disks and pay for 3 years of support and that's what I can fill up. It's elastic, it's scalable, it's on demand, but you need to make sure that you have visibility into how much is it costing. You can also leverage things like the idea of a tenant. Maybe you have multiple different organizations under your umbrella and you want to, have a big bucket of storage, but you want to allocate some to, ABC Corporation and some to XYZ Corporation, but still manage the entire umbrella, or have Tag manage the entire thing, right? And so the whole idea is that you have to have control, visibility, and understanding, the ability to quickly add storage on a Friday night because you're about to run out and you don't want your backups to fail, the ability to understand which backups are failing in which location, global sovereignty for data centers around the world, for any number of compliance reasons. Like all of that stuff is part of this solution, and that's why it's so powerful for organizations who are looking to do these kinds of things. Complete control of your object storage bucket. So a lot of companies are starting to look at object storage, whether they're looking at things like S3 compatible sync and file shares, like with CyberDoc or a couple of other different things, or maybe they're leveraging it for their developers. Like developers love S3 compatible buckets because they don't care about things like formatting drives and what kind of block size, and they just dump it all out there and do whatever they have to do, right? So understanding that you have complete control of your object storage. And then we talked a little bit about this, but really, as more organizations are moving to Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint in Office 365, which has now been renamed Microsoft 365, but so if you hear the terms, they're identical, right? You need to be able to protect that. And there's a whole bunch, and I'll talk about that in a second, but you need to be able to protect that, because when you think about it, just because you're moving to a SaaS-based application, just because you're moving to the cloud, it doesn't remove the things that you need to do as an organization to protect that data. And so with the iland and tag and Veeam solution for Office 365, you don't have to install anything on site. It's automatically cloud to cloud backup. It's secure. It's encrypted. Unlimited storage, retention, bandwidth. You don't have to worry about ingress or egress fees. There's all kinds of recovery options, whether you're, if you have a legal, a classic example, right, is, there's somebody who's working for you and they send some emails that are inappropriate. They've been fired or whatever. And then, 9 months later, there's some legal hold and there's some issue. You need to be able to recover and restore those emails so that you have some sort of proof or, whatever you need to kind of protect your company. And that's really what's important, because when you think about it, you're like, well, it's in the cloud, right? Isn't it protected? Yes and no. And we could spend an entire, another hour on just talking about Office 365, but Microsoft is really responsible for the uptime, the availability, making sure that the infrastructure is good, but the data itself is still your responsibility. I'm an old 5.5 administrator, so, all this stuff has been beaten into my head, but, you have so many different copies of your files and your emails and your calendars and stuff, but it's the same thing, so take that example I just talked about where somebody, has some sort of inappropriate material in an email. If they leave the company and you delete the user because you want to recover that license or whatever, after a while, Microsoft deletes that file as well. So, there's no long-term retention for users who are gone or people who delete stuff, right? If somebody deletes a quarterly, email or a quarterly presentation on OneDrive, and then next quarter they want to pull it back, by then it's gone, right? So you need to have the same level of data protection and recovery options that you have on site in the SaaS-based applications of Office 365. Now, that being said, backups are not enough. You have to do backups, right? And not only do you have to do backups, I harp on this all the time. You can't just do backups. Backups are necessary, they're mandatory, you have to do it, but you also have to test them, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times an organization has said, well, we've been backing up and seeing success messages in our backup software for the last 3 years, and when I tried to recover something, it was empty or it was blank. You have to not only back things up, but you have to restore them and test them. It's just part of IT. It's just part of best practices. And Tag can help you understand what some of those best practices around data protection are. But those are just simple things you have to do. But that being said, backups are still not enough. And true IT resilience lies in the ability to quickly recover your organization, right? When you think about backups, right? If you're taking a backup, this is an example I use all the time. If you're doing your backups at 8 o'clock at night and something happens at 7 o'clock the next day, well, now you're 23 hours out of date. And then how long does it take to recover, all that data? Well, maybe it's a couple more hours. And then how long does it take to redo the work that got you up to that point, if it's even redoable? So you could be looking at, for something as simple as a hardware fault, like a double fault drive or something like that, you could be looking at 48 hours of downtime. And this goes all the way back to what I talked about at the very beginning, that tangible cost and intangible cost. If you're down for 48 hours, what does that do for your organization, right? So these are things to think about. IT resilience is the ability to quickly recover your organization, whether it's power failure, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a ransomware, it doesn't matter. Now, that being said, I've been doing this for a very long time, and it's way easier to talk about disaster recovery and IT resilience than it is to actually do it, right? Back in the old days being like 4 years ago, you had to have a secondary site, and you had to have some sort of site-to-site replication, maybe potentially something SAN to SAN, or leveraging some sort of software-based replication. You had to test it. You had to go there. You had to manage and maintain 2 sets of hardware. And a lot of times what people would do is they would take their old hardware, move it to another data center, and then, replicate to that. But the problem is now you're taking hardware that's already out of date and already not as good as the production equipment, and you're hoping that in the case of a total disaster that's the thing that's going to run your company. It just doesn't work, right? So, when you start talking about disaster recovery and you start talking about IT resilience, you start talking about multiple pieces of hardware and all of the different contracts and hardware replacement and maintaining patch levels and BIOS and firmware, and holy cow, it can be crazy, right? Let alone 2 different data centers and power and cooling and rack and stack and space, and it's just crazy, right? And then again, replication, duplication can be costly. It could be bandwidth intensive. It could be costly if you're trying to get out of the same geographic region, if you're trying to go across the country or the world. It can be crazy. And then testing, of course, can be really risky, because if somebody presses the wrong button or screws something up, now you have 2 sites, you've got active brains, and virtual machines are failing, and you've got this duplicate IP addresses. It's a nightmare. And I can't tell you how many customers who have started down this process of, I need IT resilience, this is what we're going to do, and then after about 2 or 3 months, they just throw up their hands and say, yep, we're not going to do that. Now, that is where cloud comes in, and disaster recovery as a service offers a true resilient path forward for organizations. There's no upfront capital expenses. You don't have to go and purchase additional hardware, right? Cloud-based infrastructure has really kind of revolutionized how people consume IT resources. It's really revolutionized the cost structure. You go from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, and you start saying, okay, well, I'm only going to pay for what I need, right? Nowadays, you go buy a whole bunch of servers and SANs and switches, and then you're like, oh, darn, I need to replicate this. Let me go buy it all again. And then you pay for 3 years of hardware maintenance and all this stuff and rack and stack and power and cooling and all that, and it just sits there. And you hope you never have to use it, but just in case. But that's a capital expense that you have to do, and a lot of times that fails, right? Geographic redundancy. Iland has global data centers all over the world for global sovereignty, maybe compliance reasons that you can't have data, like we have compliance specialists who can help you, along with TAG, understand what it is you need. If you have Canadian data, there's certain rules that you can only do with Canadian data. If you have European data, there's only certain things you can do with that. And not only with what you can do with it, but where you can store it, global sovereignty rules and where it lives and all that stuff. And so when you start thinking about, well, I need to do IT resilience, but now I need to look at a European data center that I can't even send my people to go fix. Like, it just becomes astronomically difficult and hard to do. Cloud changes that. Now, another great thing, virtualization, encapsulation, mobility of virtual machines with the VMware environment. Iland is a VMware-based cloud, which means you don't have to worry about virtual machines, transitioning or changing. You don't have to worry about your tools or your drivers or any of that. It just comes up. And what that does, along with encapsulation, is it allows you to test anytime without causing disruption. And this is one of the most powerful points to IT resilience and disaster recovery that VMware and cloud has offered, is the ability to say, back in the old days, right, a couple of years ago, somebody would come in, usually your boss, and say, hey, I just saw that there was a hurricane. How are we doing? There was a ransomware. What can we do? Or, how do we look? And you say, okay, well, 4 months ago when we powered everything off and we moved to our other location, it only took us 6 days to get everything back up and running. Well, that's not really a viable solution, right? But now that same person comes into your office and you click a button and you create this isolated, segmented virtualized version of your data center. It could be partial failover, it could be a full site failover. You bring it all online, it's all isolated, it's not interrupting and it's not disrupting your production stuff. It allows you to test it, allows you to play around with it. And so that same person comes in and says, hey, you know, where are we at? And you say, well, I ran it last week, but let's do this. Let's run it right now. We'll go to lunch. We'll come back. I'll read you the report. Here are the virtual machines that powered on. Here are all the different VLANs. Here are all the network switches settings. Here's all the security information. Here's everything we need to know so that I have full confidence that no matter what happens, I can recover this organization as quickly as possible. And again, you know, it's almost hurricane season, or it is hurricane season or something like that. You know, a lot of times that gets the news, but what if there's a power outage? You know, how long before you push the button, before you can run your company? Do you wait for the building power to come back on, or do you just push a button? And, you know, when you start thinking about IT resilience and you start thinking about how quickly you can recover, and you've got RTOs and RPOs and all sorts of stuff like that, it's a very powerful message to be able to say, hey, I can have us up and running, boss or CIO or CFO or CEO or whoever. I can have us up and running within 10, 15, 20 minutes, and we've only lost maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes worth of data, versus, well, we got to go buy some hardware and we got to wait for it to ship and we got to wait for the parts to come, and then we're going to recover a backup from 4 days ago, and that's going to take 4 days, and then we'll be up in a week and a half, right? It just doesn't make sense, right? You have to be able to do IT resilience, and the automation reporting can improve that confidence and allow you the ability to show not only to your internal auditors, but to your customers, because your customers are becoming more savvy. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to apply for cyber insurance, you know, from an insurance company, or you're trying to win a bid for a company. They're going to come to you and say, hey, what do you do in the case of cyber crime? What do you do in case of a power outage? What do you do? How quickly can you recover? What's your RTO? Organizations are more savvy, and they will require the same auditing and documentation that you probably do internally, right? Now, that's where disaster recovery as a service offers a path forward for your organization to kind of meet that. Now, Veeam offers a single unified solution for all of that, and that's really the best thing about this. Now, the great thing about Tag is, you know, as a managed service provider, as a you know, professional service provider, they can help you. They can help you set it up. They can help you do it. They can do it all for you, right? It's really about making sure that the solution fits what you're trying to accomplish. And if that solution also requires, you know, a helping hand, hey, we're all here for that. Our job is to make you successful. Now, making sure that you never lose visibility or management is one of the biggest things. And whether you're managing it, whether Tag is managing it, the iland Secure Cloud Console gives you a unified management platform for all of your cloud operations. It doesn't matter if you've got backup, object storage, Office 365, disaster recovery, and even some infrastructure. You don't want to have to bounce around 17 different tools and all sorts of stuff like that. So within the iland Secure Cloud Console, we have this whole idea called IT continuity, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that can show you how we can create recovery groups, which are basically assets of IT dependencies that allow you to say, okay, here's my tier 1 apps, or my gold and silver, or, you know, here are the things that in the case of disaster I need to bring up, my, you know, ERPs and, you know, PeopleSoft and all that stuff like that. I could do partial site failovers, I could do full site failures. Being able to do runbooks and automate and orchestrate the entire disaster recovery plan is a very powerful tool. Because think about it, right? You've got 10 virtual machines. It's really easy to say, okay, well, I'll power on AD first, and then I'll power on this, and then I'll power on that, and then I'll make sure that the services start, and then I'll power on this, and I'm up and running. If you have 410 virtual machines, the last thing you want to do is at 3 o'clock in the morning try to figure out which virtual machines need to come up when to get your organization back on track, because you've never tested it, right? So the ability to create these recovery groups, to create runbooks, to test individual runbooks, to test individual scenarios. You can say, hey, on Mondays, I'm going to test a full site failover. On Fridays, I'm going to test my tier 1 sales ERP, whatever, something or other, application failover, and get reports and have confidence. And while you never want to see a failure, the best time for a failure is during one of these tests, because you can say, oh, I forgot to replicate the D drive, or I forgot to, add this dependency of this one random virtual machine that nobody uses except for, that one person in accounting. Being able to understand where your failures are so that you can fix them, retest, and then have a successful audit is perfect, because that does give you the confidence in your ability to do that. And again, reporting, understanding your RPOs and your SLAs and all that stuff. Now, one of the things that Tag can help you do is, while Iland and Veeam are providing the solution for the actual bringing the virtual machines online, before you even get there, there's an entire conversation you need to have with application owners and business owners, and what does it take to bring your application online? What are the dependencies? And Tag can help you go through those steps to understand where the pain points are, what the expectations are, and sometimes just have the hard conversation of, no, you cannot have 7,000 virtual machines up in 6 minutes. It's just not going to work. So pick your favorites, right? That kind of stuff. But that is another discussion. And I think I forgot to save the date. Dave, do you remember, or Laura, do you remember when the next one is? It's September 20. Anybody? If not, we'll get that information out to you.
September 22nd.
There you go. So I apologize. I should have had this on that. But basically on September 22nd, we'll have the next phase of this discussion, really talking about IT resilience, and how you can leverage some of those things I talked about. Now, that being said, Tag, Iland, Veeam, our focus is your success. We have been a leading recovery platform for a long time. We've been doing this for a very long time. Our goal is to simplify the journey, whether you're doing it, whether Tag is doing it, however we can help. This is what we do. This is what we focus in. Our top tier support, our top tier, consultative approach. Our job is to make you successful. Again, because IT's job is not disaster recovery. IT's job is to bring value back to the business, but they have to have backup and recovery, and we're going to just make it better for you. We've been doing this for a very long time. Gartner has actually named us the leader in the Magic Quadrant for Disaster Recovery as a Service the last 4 years running. We've won multiple vendor awards and partner awards, from across the globe. We have an entire global certification and compliance team, legal team. We can work with Tag and yourselves to understand what necessary needs you have and all that stuff. We're very proud of our Net Promoter Score and customer satisfaction because of how much our customers recommend us to their colleagues. And with that, we're going to go ahead and open it up for a little bit of questions and answers. I've seen a couple things come in. Laura, if you have anything that you would like to jump out, and then David, yourself as well.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions, Will. The first is for Dave, I believe. Do you provide auditing services?
We do provide auditing services. We would need to know the particulars of what kind.
Yeah, and to follow that up, Dave, can you spend a couple of minutes a little bit more on the, when I talk disaster recovery, right, I talk about the technology of replicating virtual machines from one place to another and how you can turn them on. But as we all know, disaster recovery, IT resilience, there's so much more to it. There's the people factor, there's, the displacement factor, there's the working from home factor. What are some of the things that you guys do as far as consultative when it comes to that type stuff?
Yeah, thanks for that, Will. So I guess two things. Thing number one is if you're on this call and you sat through it on this webinar and you sat through it and you feel like you're in good shape, great, good for you. We verified that you have a good plan. If you're on the call and you're overwhelmed, we've got a lot of information here. We can help. So I think there's probably 3 big ways that we can help people on this call. One is to help them create a strategy for backup, to define the entire backup process, the frequency, how it should work, what type of medium they should use. And then in terms of disaster recovery, right, we can do the same thing. We can help write disaster recovery plans and ensure those plans are tested on a frequent basis. And finally, you know, a lot of our customers tend to be either a busy business owner or an IT professional that just doesn't really have time, and they really just don't want to deal with the burden of backup and disaster recovery. We can literally manage the entire process from soup to nuts.
Awesome.
Okay, we do have one other question. Jim is a little concerned. He doesn't know how much backup storage he needs for a project like this.
Yeah, so I'll jump in for that. So, and it's a common question that we hear all the time when it comes to cloud, right? Like, it's so easy to be like, wow, this is awesome. Cloud's great. How much do I, and you know, and the cloud person will say, sure, I'll sell you whatever you want. And then you say, well, how much do I need? And it's like, well, I don't know. You tell me. Well, I don't know. You tell me. So, at Iland, you know, and Tag has the ability to come in and do a full assessment of your organization. So, we have a tool called Catalyst, which is a free analysis tool, and it allows you to really kind of get an understanding of how your organization is being utilized. You know, how much RAM, how much CPU, how much storage is being used. You know, calculators that allow you to put in your recovery and retention policies. Like, do you want to have, you know, grandfather, father, son backup policies? How long are you keeping it? Are you regulated by some government agency to keep it for 7 years or 3 years? You know, do you offload it to, you know, to Worm every 4 years? You know, all sorts of stuff like that. So it really gives you, based on your actual data and not just rough napkin math, the ability to understand how much you need, right? Because that's really, really important when it comes to this, because you don't want to overspend, right? Because then you're right back into buying a second site or buying additional hardware. But you don't want to under provision and either have a failure where you can't back up, or you can't, you know, replicate properly, or you can't, you know, run the performance and stuff like that. And again, that's where cloud really kind of helps organizations kind of budget that, because you can know what your cloud spend is going to be on a month-to-month basis. You can see how it grows, you can see how it scales, and as customers grow and add more stuff, you know, that's all part of it. So. Whoops, I don't know. There's supposed to be a big giant thank you right there. So, I think that's it. We're gonna give people some time back. Dave, is there any last couple messages you want to say, talking about reaching out to customers and anything that they're gonna get?
Yep. So anybody on this call who you think they might need some support, you can reach out to me directly at dvenner@tagsolutions.com, or you can call our number and ask for me or any other one of our professionals here to help you out.
Awesome. And Laura, did you want to cover the Starbucks thing real quick?
Yes, Andrea from Tag Solutions is offering a Starbucks gift card to everyone who stayed tuned for the broadcast today. So you can look for that in your email in the next couple of days.
Awesome. And so while we would like to have taken everyone out to coffee to have this conversation face to face, because of the current situation, we can't, but we're still gonna throw you guys some coffee. So on behalf of Iland, Tag, our partners everywhere, all of our solutions, I want to thank everybody. Dave, thank you so much for having us. This has been awesome. We look forward to seeing everyone on the next one when we start talking more about IT resilience and some of the disaster recovery stuff a little bit more in depth. Dave, is there anything else you wanted to say in closing?
No, thanks everybody for their time, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week, wonderful afternoon, wonderful weekend, month, etc. And we'll all get through this together, and we're here for you to make you guys successful. So thank you very much. Take care.